Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rosini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
It is great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. You know, once again, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Federal Reserve in a little different twist, but also emphasizing the importance of the Federal Reserve. Mostly bad news. I don't think they've ever solved any problems. They create problems. And also, we will work in the constant emphasis in the media with the coronavirus. And of course, they are connected in many ways because the country is facing this horrendous problem. The problem is probably economic more than anything else, but we have a pretty good handle on how that originated because Austrian economists, for years have warned, the world what was coming because it was a complete explosion of credit and interest rates way below normal, total increase of massive debt and malinvestment, and that a correction had to come. The one thing they wouldn't accept is the fact that corrections are good. You know, if you're sick and doing the wrong thing, if you discover what's going on, then that's good to have a correction. That's not the way it works in economics because the bubble phase of the system really benefits a lot of people. In the short run, everybody benefits, and that's why there was no attempt, even thought about changing policy. But finally, when the crisis hit and the stock market crashes and things get worse because of coronavirus, they decide, well, I guess we didn't have interest rates low enough. I know they're negative, but we got to get them lower. Oh, I guess we haven't spent enough money, so we'll spend more money. I guess the deficit's not big enough, so we'll have a bigger deficit. And it won't matter because Keynesian economics says that's really a good thing to do, and it would be a little bit of pain involved in cutting back, which they're right about. But the natural courses of events in economics is the correction will come. It's just that the prolongation and the continuation of government and Federal Reserve mischief just makes it that much worse. But, the Fed is easily identified as the culprit when we talk about malinvestment, bubbles, and downturns, which we can expect. The coronavirus is a little bit different because people would readily say, well, that's beyond our control. It's nature, and that's the reason we have it. But there's a lot of questions exactly what's going on, how bad it really is, and what the public health policies of our government have, whether or not it's been helpful or harmful. I think there is a danger with the coronavirus, but I don't think that the public health approach of our government is worth a whole lot. They generally mess things up. And if you study the history of CDC and the advisors coming out of CDC, it's not very reassuring. And so the managed care, the CDC managed care of health matters, public health, is really not very viable. It's socialized. It's socializing a problem and looking for government answers. And then we end up with these massive dictates, and here you mix them up, and the health people come and say, we don't want anybody to work. Everybody has to quit working. Then they wonder why there were 700,000 people, looking for unemployment benefits this week. As a matter of fact, it could have been today, and now those numbers are going up. So it's this combination of making mistakes in the Federal Reserve, thinking printing money and run up debts is a good, healthy way to run the economy, which it isn't. It makes things worse. And then we come along and we deal with a health problem which is real, which is being taken care of by a socialized system. So we can't expect with current policy to solve these problems. Eventually, good sense and the utter chaos that it will cause, I think things will get better because, endemics like this, they don't last forever, but all we hear are the negative aspects of it and not the possibilities. It's not quite as bad as they say. All we read about is the negatives, and it's pumped up. It's universal on the media. It's terrorizing the people, and it's pretty hard, to advise a common sense and a different approach. But that's what we're facing. So we have to deal with these two major things: the wrong approach for the coronavirus and the wrong approach to the Federal Reserve. Like, we should be talking about how can we doctor up the Federal Reserve policies rather than saying, how did we ever get the Federal Reserve and they're not worth their salt, and how are we going to get rid of it?
Yes, Dr. Paul, we're here to help. I mean, speaking of the Federal Reserve, it took them 10 years to double the money supply after the crisis in '08, which is insane. Why would you want to double the money supply? And I recently read that they're on pace, if it's correct, to do it in 2 years. They're printing money as if this is their way out. And there is absolutely no benefit to printing money, no economic benefit. It only causes problems. You know, if you have sound money like gold, you have however many ounces there are in the world, and that's it. And then prices adjust based on that supply, and that's all you need. You do not need anybody to go dig out more gold. You don't need any of that. No central planning. Prices will be stable and revolve around however much gold there is. But and even gold and dollars, this is not what wealth is. Goods and services are wealth, the products we have, the services that people give us. And that's what America was built around, this massive amount of products and services. But now people aren't producing, yet they're producing more money, which does no good. More money will not give me an iPhone or a banana, you know, and it won't put people back to work. So they are beat. The central planners are beat. They just will not give up until they have to give up.
You know, the planners create all these problems, and they pretend to ignore the market forces, that they can ignore economic laws. And they do, and they make things much worse. But you can't bury the market. The market always lives. Even in the worst communist society, there will be a market, because there will be an underground economy, especially for the leaders. You know, they will get their services. So you can't bury the market. You can ignore the market when people are benefiting from the counterfeit. Or in the early years of any counterfeit, they do quite well until they're caught at it. And I think what's happening now is they've been caught, and now they are talking about monetary reforms. They're not just seriously talking about moving in the right direction, but they are starting to talk about it. But when we had when gold was illegal and we had Bretton Woods, and gold and the dollar was fixed as a ratio of $35 to the ounce, it worked for a good many years. But eventually the market said, you can't get away with just printing money and claiming the dollar is pegged at $35 an ounce. The market broke that down, and ushered in a new era, and we've had that, a total fiat system, since 1951 worldwide, and we've been in charge of it. The United States has been in charge of it. And it's been very fragile. The indications have been there. Like I said, the free market Austrian economists have warned about this. But I think there was another date to be remembered, just like August 15th, 1971, and that is September 17th, 2019. That is when the repo market broke down, and hugely. They were fixing, the overnight rates at near 0%, and all of a sudden there was a shortage of money, which is always the case. They print all this money, but eventually there's a shortage of money because it's a flawed system. So immediately it broke down, and the rates bumped up to 10%, and they have been struggling since. And that's why, Chris, those numbers you were citing, the tremendous increase in the balance sheet after it dropped a smidgen from the massive increase from 10 years ago. But the system is the same. So now it's exploding again much faster than what happened 10 years ago. But how do you know what real interest rates are in the midst of all this price fixing of money? Well, the one I've already mentioned, those overnight rates, finally said they had to be more, and there had to be this adjustment. But there's another one that is really such an unfair system, and that is what the average consumer has to do when he becomes a victim of this terrible system. First, he's enticed to do the borrowing, just like the government does, and they live beyond their means, just like the government does. And then all of a sudden, interest rates keep creeping up where there's a little bit more freedom. So the consumer gets the lecture. Well, we can't keep loaning you this money because you're at high risk. Governments and banks aren't at high risk because they just get bailed out. But the consumer isn't. So their rates are 17%. So it's very, very unfair. But that's probably closer to what would happen in the marketplace. But the problem is if we had our way and instituted all these policies under today's conditions, it would be unacceptable, because it would actually make things worse and people wouldn't like it. There'd be revolutions and shooting and killing, but that might come anyway. But I still think it's vital that we talk about the proper policy, so when the market drives us to a crisis much bigger than we have today, we ought to know what the answer to it is. And though we cannot tomorrow wave a wand and get everybody to say, oh yeah, everybody should cut spending and go back to being doing normal things, but they will have to make a decision. I would like to see something, and I've talked about it with money, is the money is a fraudulent system. I want competition in money. I want you to be able to opt out and use something else's money, but the law says only paper money can be legal tender. We should legalize competition. But in a crisis like this, why couldn't we legalize freedom of choice? Let people opt out of the system and just say, look, I don't want anything from the government. You don't have to give me any money. And just let me go to work and let me keep what I earn. And if you have to raise money for other reasons, don't do it by taxing the very necessary thing of the incentives to earn some money. But that's not likely, but that would probably work without saying tomorrow everything is closed down, the government is closed down. But people say that would be so vicious, but the whole thing is, they really should be concerned about it when they see what's happening now, that the whole thing might get closed down without policy. The market might close it down, and that is, the market will close it down when there's massive loss of confidence in the value of the U.S. dollar.
Right, Dr. Paul, and you alluded earlier to the other side of the coin. You said public health, and that's what government thinks that they're in charge of. But this may come as a surprise to people. There is no such thing as public health. That's collectivist non-thinking. That's the language of power. There are only individuals. Some are healthy, some are not healthy, some are so-so healthy, and everything in between. There's no such thing as public health any more than there's a public arm or a public leg or a public mind. There's no such thing. And once you start thinking in those terms, you might as well start talking about the tooth fairy, because that's how real it is. But government, their actions are based on this fantasy. They treat everyone as if they're the same. Look at public schools, how they take all these millions and millions of individuals and they try to, with a cookie cutter, try to teach them all the same way, and it doesn't work. And this is how that they've responded to this virus. They just steamrolled everyone and put everyone in the same, even though we're all 300 million individuals, they steamrolled everyone. And even some are suggesting, and it's sickening, that of locking 300 million people into their houses. I mean, the audacity of thinking that you can tell 300 million people what to do, how they can move, it's beyond belief. But that's how authoritarians think. And as long as Americans think that this is okay and how it should be done, we're going to continue to have even bigger problems.
One thought that has been around a long time that helps me figure this out and understand it, and that is that people as a collective group, it has been said that men think in herds. They just go with the flow, and that happens, and a certain amount of that will always happen, but what you want are leaders that will lead those people who are looking for guidance to go in the right direction. But they think in herds, but they could think properly in herds if you listen to the right economists, the people who believe in liberty. But no, they not only think in herds, they go mad. They go mad in herds, and that's what we're witnessing. I think when the history of this virus is written, people are going to say, why did they do this? Why were so many people suffering from way too much excessive government debt and borrowing and spending all this? And why did they close everything down and say, you can't work and you have to do exactly what the government tells you? You have to sacrifice your freedoms to be safe and prosperous. So that to me explains how we get here. But the saying also goes that we as a society can go mad in herds, that we only recover one person at a time. That's discouraging, but it's also the motivation that if you can convince one person that it's time we talk about liberty and get rid of this notion that governments can take care of us, one at a time can spread. It can be like they claim the virus does. Exponentially it's going to explode and millions are involved. Well, ideas do spread. And that's the reason one person at a time helps, because that should multiply. And that is nothing we can't achieve and solve our problem unless we do change the minds of the people. Because if we could institute all those corrections right now, if the people didn't understand it, it would only give us chaos, civil strife, and a lot of killing and violence. So the herds can turn into mobs quite easily, and we do see mobs now. Not only in the socialist countries, but we see it in this country too. People think in herds that turn into mobs, and they believe it in a religious fashion that they have a right to other people's property. They have a right to use government violence to redistribute the wealth. It's morally correct, and it's held in high esteem, and they're doing the proper thing. As long as government violence is held in high esteem to take wealth and control people and destroy liberty and deflect from this by starting another war, and just look at the agitation going on in Venezuela. We need a war in Venezuela, and we need to take over another country and install another president, like we need a hole in our head. But nevertheless, it's the same old policies again. So we have to change people's hearts and minds, get to where they're not so frightened by being a free person, that they can take care of themselves. They say, oh no, I'll probably die. Well, a lot more people are going to die as a consequence of public health. You know, the virus is serious, it's dangerous, and people die from it. But a lot more people are suffering when you combine it with a disaster from the Federal Reserve, and then combine it with health dictators who are coming in and saying, this is what you do, just don't go out of the house, put your head in the sand, and maybe when the sand goes away, you'll be okay. No, that is not it. We just can't bury our heads in the sand. But ideologically, you have to understand that a society is much better off, because history shows it. The freer our country is, the more it's up to the individual, the more it is up to private enterprise to solve our problems and prevent problems, such as having sound money versus government money, fiat money, counterfeit money, and runaway government spending and debt. The sooner we learn that, the better, because history shows in our history in this country that as we once were a much freer country, we were also the most prosperous. We are not the most prosperous. And we used to have the largest middle class, and we do not have it. But the world is suffering from the consequences, because unfortunately we have a lot of influence. So it's this idea that you have to have one source of a worldwide currency to run the world, and allow great power to gravitate to that nation that has to be really contested and understood. And right now, I think that's what's going on. It is being contested. We are being contested with our foreign policy as well as our financial policy. So it's not a natural disaster. This is not a hurricane. This is not an earthquake. This is man-made problems, and that's what we have to realize. And we can solve them. All we have to do is look at the benefits of what a free society can give us.
That's great, Dr. Paul. I'm going to finish by reiterating that this is the role of government that we're talking about. And if you think about what just happened, we started with a problem, a real problem with the virus, but then government jumped in, and people want government to jump in. And what happened? Now we not only have the virus, we have a stock market problem, we have an economy problem, a Fed counterfeiting problem, 10 million people unemployed, 30% are probably going to be delinquent on their mortgages. There are psychological problems that are piling up, and health problems of everybody staying in their homes. And we have all of this on top of the virus, which is still a problem. So this is a great illustration of how you should not run to government to solve problems. It only multiplies them. At most, the way America was supposed to be was that government is there to protect our liberty. Somebody commits violence, somebody commits fraud, the government is there to punish these people. The government is not there to solve problems. They're there to punish people that are disregarding and disrespecting liberty. Once you accept that government is a problem solver, now you've got the biggest problem of them all in your hands, and that's what we're dealing with today.
Very good. And when you get into the business of bailouts, which most Americans now are very familiar with, 2008 and 2009 and the subsequent years after that. The bailout was there, and the bailout tided us over, but didn't correct the problem, and it wasn't fair. And people know now that the banks and the big corporations and the military-industrial complex, they were the ones that benefited by it. But there's been some advertisement on the television to show that things are moving along okay because what we need are more hospital beds. And I'm not so sure that is really the answer. I think they need more sunshine. People need more sunshine, not hospital. But we do need hospitals. But the pictures in my mind is the two U.S. government ships, huge ships, used to be military vessels, converted to hospitals, big red crosses on. I thought, well, that's something I shouldn't really object to. Maybe this, even though I think it's government-created problem, maybe this is one thing government at least could take care of some of these people. But that's sort of like saying, well, why don't we turn all our hospitals into VA hospitals? Well, tell you what, those ships been around for a week or so. They've had a total of 20 patients use the hospital. So it's not effective. They're ineffective, and it's not fair. And that's why we cannot depend on the federal government that was responsible for so much of the mess we have to solve the problem. The only thing that can solve the problem is getting our liberties back. We want the opportunity to opt out. I want people to opt out of the monetary system, the medical system, and opt out of the schooling system. Believe me, just opting out doesn't mean we're going to close down anybody. And now today you don't have to say, well, we need you to tax you. They believe in the modern monetary theory. If they want to stay in the system, just print the money and you use it. But let us opt out and let us take care of ourselves. And I believe we can take care of ourselves better medically, better in education, and that we can take care of our monetary affairs much better too, because it's natural. And it says the Constitution says that only gold and silver should be used. So the answers are there. They're not complex. All I ask for is let us have the little bit of freedom left. Let us opt out. That was the big issue on Obamacare. It was a mandate, and Republicans hated it. Let's get rid of it. But I don't think they quite understood about opting out in reality from our medical system, our economic system, and our monetary system. Let's hope that day comes because I believe so strongly in it, and I believe a growing number of people agree. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.